Well, welcome everybody. I'm Paul Wise. I'm the General Surgery Residency Program Director here at Washington University in St. Louis. We're really excited to have you all here. This is our favorite time of year, although admittedly not my favorite way to do interviews, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. But we love the recruitment season. It's a lot of fun to get a chance to meet people from all over the globe and to get an opportunity to be able to recruit our next wonderful group of residents. Tonight, we've got a number of faculty and a few of our junior residents, especially interns. We've got a few senior residents who either have an interest in the interviewing process, recruitment process, as well as some of our senior residents who participated in interviewing last year. I tried not to have too many folks here but want to get you enough to get you all some kind of understanding of our experience and exposure to the virtual interview process. This is going to be very informal. We just wanted to give you all some of our insights into the experience and see if you can benefit from it. And that's whether you end up being interested in Washington University per se. We hope you all are, but just kind of get a little bit of our insights into the practice and experience of it. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Now, a number of you were kind enough to send us questions. We're going to try to address as many of those as we can. A number of those questions were related to St. Louis. A number of them were related to our kind of different aspects of the training program, like our didactics, like the flexibility and training that we are famous for. I'm not going to go into those quite as deeply tonight. Hopefully you noticed when you signed up that we are planning on having a session related to St. Louis and related to flexibility and training. I will say that St. Louis is a great city. If you haven't had a chance to visit, I hope you get a chance to. It's safe. About 2/3 of our residents live right by the hospital in the Central West End. It's got a thriving food scene, great sports scene, lots of stuff to do. And best thing is very little traffic. So, which is what I love. I hate being stuck in traffic. And so we'll get a chance to dive into that. But what we're planning on doing is having this kind of more a session here with some of the faculty. We are recording this, as you'll notice, but we're going to record the first part. When the faculty leave and it becomes just applicants and residents, then we will stop the recording. So you all can ask earnest, in-depth questions. You can give them the hardball questions if you want about our program, about virtual recruiting, about interviewing, anything like that. And none of that will be saved for posterity. So the other thing about the flexibility is that we do really have tried to push the envelope and be innovative about our training programs and try to look into different ways to achieve the kind of training that you want to achieve. So we're very proud of the flexibility option that we have here. And that's something that we'll address more in another session. We have recorded some of our sessions from last year. And so if you want to get an insight into what those other sessions will be like, you can watch those and they may answer the questions that you've got. Well, let's get on to the topic at hand, and that's looking at doing virtual interviews. Virtual interviewing is stressful. It's stressful for programs and it's stressful for you all, just as in-person interviewing can be stressful. We fully recognize the benefits of virtual interviews, both taking away, clearly the cost for both programs and for interviewees. Obviously, not having to pay to travel and hotels and all of that, Airbnbs, et cetera, is nice. It's also nice to not have to spend that time to travel everywhere. And it is nice because virtual interviews are on time, right? Like if this session were to end, we'd be done and we would finish it. So it makes sure that we stay on time when it comes to the processes of the virtual interview. So that part's nice. And we fully appreciate from an equity standpoint, access, that it really opens a lot of doors for folks who might otherwise not be able to travel, either due to cost or time, that they wouldn't otherwise be able to participate in the interviewing process. But the biggest downside, I think, is really being able to establish fit. When you're not able to come to a place and meet folks one-on-one and spend extra time with them. And we routinely, for our interview sessions, would have folks come the night before. We would have a kind of happy hour meet and greet where faculty and residents would mingle with the applicants. And then the next morning, we would have kind of our, what I call our dog and pony show, where we would show you all the great things about the program. And then we would do the interviews and then have lunch. And then we routinely do a trolley tour and would take you around the city and show you what the city is like, so that any biases that you may have against or for the city would hopefully be addressed, and have a chance to really get to take a look, and then go out to dinner with the residents. And so it's residents and applicants who get to go out. And so that ends up being a really, it's at least 24 hours of time to be able to interact with the training program, and about 70 to 80% of our applicants will take advantage of those non-required evening sessions to be able to interact with folks and get that fit. It's obviously really hard to sort out that fit online and through virtual interviews on both sides of things. And that, to me, is the most stressful part about it. So I think when we look at how best to be able to address the benefits and negative aspects of virtual interviews, the one thing that I would say is some of the surprises that I had. One of the biggest surprises that I had, I was pretty negative about it, I must admit, but it worked. And so it worked really well. We got spectacular residents here. So our intern class is fantastic. And not that I'm surprised about that necessarily from having met them in the virtual format and then having them arrive here. But that the fact that I was kind of a naysayer, I was worried that we were going to have a hard time sorting out all of the things that I'm talking about with fit. But thus far, it's really seemed to have worked, and I'll let them say their thoughts about that. The other big surprise that I found was that I fully didn't appreciate the height of people. And so it really kind of exposed my implicit bias about how whenever I would talk to people, I would make assumptions about how tall they were. And so it was pretty funny when I met the interns and they met me and they were like, "You're tall." And I'm like, "You're short." And so it was that part was funny, and I hadn't even thought about that. And so that was one of the biggest surprises for me. So when I ask some of the other participants on this to tell me their biggest surprises, maybe they'll have other thoughts about it. But what virtual interviews does is it puts a lot of pressure on you all to be able to do a deep dive into a program and sort out whether or not that program is a fit. And we will try to do everything we can for those people interested in WashU to show you who we are. And sessions like this that will help. A lot of the online materials that we put on there. For those of you who haven't seen my virtual tour, I will put a link on there. But that gives you a little bit of insight into our program in the city and me. But there's lots of materials that are out there, and it kind of makes you all have to do a little bit more of your homework. So it's more than just a click of a button and, oh, I'm interested in that program. And then if they offer me an interview, I'll go there in person and then I'll figure it out. So I think it has you all have to do a lot of that work up front. And what it also means is talking to your mentors, to current residents at your institutions to find out their thoughts about programs. So it puts a little bit more onus on you. I will say, just as a little asterisk, that a lot of programs are doing these kind of sessions. And one of the fears I heard from our WashU students is everybody taking attendance? Are they going to see if we're here? Are they going to pay attention? We're not. We don't have the bandwidth to pay that much attention and take attendance. I know people get nervous about that, like I signed up and I didn't show up, or there are issues. We don't really have the capability and to be able to take all that time to track it, to say, oh, Susie Q or Billy Bob didn't show up. Uh-oh, that's a big red mark for them. We're not. Now, obviously the interviews themselves we would notice, but for these kind of sessions, these kind of online sessions, no. So the tips that I would give you, my suggestions, number one, be prepared. So do your homework, read up on the programs, know the things that are going to be important to you about the programs, what you are going to really looking for in a program. That is incredibly important. And so when you show up and if you have very kind of generic questions, it's clear you haven't done any kind of research into the program. Kind of the worst thing that I've seen is when people ask questions that are very clearly covered on our website, essentially on the front page of the website, and people are asking questions about that. I can tell they didn't do their research, or if we had prepared videos that we had sent to our interviewees and they clearly hadn't looked at any of that material. And so that just kind of shows us how interested you are in us if you haven't done your homework and you're not prepared. So I think the first thing is making sure that you're prepared and that you paid attention. The second thing is, and it's obvious, from this is, and there's a lot of material online about it, but your surroundings, your background, your light, and obviously your internet connection. So if you show up and you've got problems with your internet, and then you tell us like, oh yeah, my building has problems with this, or I've got a terrible internet connection. I realize not everyone has access to the best internet all the time, but if you know you have trouble, either address that with us up front, or do what you can to try to mitigate that, whether that's going to your school or going someplace that has good internet connections. I do want to say something about interview hoarding. So virtual interviews have given everyone the opportunity to be able to go to as many interviews as they like, essentially. Obviously not an infinite number, but you can go to a lot. We normally have about 20 to 30% turnover in our interviews. So we invite folks, and especially as we get into the later part of the interview season, we have a number of people who will contact us and say, you know what, I've just decided I'm not interested. Okay, fine, thank you. We can then offer someone else that interview slot. And last year we had less than 5% turnover in our interviews. And we had lots of folks knocking at our door who were very interested in interviewing with us, but we just didn't have the capacity to be able to add them. And it was clear that some of the applicants who did interview with us, especially later in the season, weren't truly that interested. And so I would just encourage you all that if you're truly interested in a program, by all means, interview there. But if you're not, no one is keeping track of who has rejected whom, and it's totally fine to reach out and say, you know what, I'd rather give up that spot to someone who might be interested in being there. I'm not. And so please don't interview with us or other programs just because you're a little bit curious and you think the odds are that you don't want to go there. That being said, if you have an earnest interest, you've done your homework and you think it's a great place, by all means, stick with that interview. But I personally have some equity concerns about the number of people who had originally been contacted. Everyone kind of hoards those interviews. A lot of those folks who may be just kind of on the waiting list, waiting to come in, don't get a chance to get interviews. And those folks don't normally would get 10 or 15 interviews, and now they're not getting any because other people are hoarding the interviews. And now you're seeing that a lot of folks who would normally get a chance to match aren't. And the problem is we don't have great data about that from last year. And so that's one of my big concerns, is that there can be some negative impact to equity with virtual interviews. So keep that in mind. And then the final thing that I would mention as my piece of advice before I kind of turn it over to some of my colleagues is, as part of your preparation, if you're one of those people who just doesn't do very well with this kind of format, it's just not something you're very comfortable with, do some mock interviews with folks with folks at your institution. Test out the system, make sure it works, and by the system, I mean your system and your approach and how you're going to do it. Because I do think also impacting the outcomes for many folks is how they did in this format, because it's not for everyone, and we understand that. But I do think there are some fantastic applicants out there who didn't do well with virtual interviews, and that became a big problem. And so I would encourage you, and I would encourage anybody, at least do one mock oral interview with somebody in your institution. It doesn't even have to be in surgery. It could be somebody in another subspecialty, just a faculty member, a mentor whom you trust, and just have them do it and run through your system to make sure it works. So you don't find out mid-season people are like, they don't interview well in a virtual format. A few of the questions that we got were, what are some negative things about, what did we see, some bad stuff? I saw a few funny things. I won't say it's necessarily bad, but we had one interviewee, and I'm sure multiple people did it, but I did have one interviewee who kind of partway stood up and was wearing shorts, and I thought that was pretty funny. They were wearing their suit top, and I don't think he realized I saw it, but it definitely made me chuckle. And so I won't say that it negatively impacted him, but it definitely was a good laugh for me. Keep your phone silenced and other things around you as much as you can. I know we forget that all the time. We did have a number of folks who had some pretty strange backgrounds. I know a lot of you have looked at the stuff that's behind me while I've been talking, and you've noticed I've got a toilet coffee cup behind me, perhaps, or things like that. I'm a colorectal surgeon, so I've got to have a sense of humor to do what I do. So that's why I've got it. But be thoughtful about what's behind you. We definitely had some applicants who had very intentionally some very interesting stuff behind them, where there was books or dioramas or other stuff that certainly became conversation pieces, some of which were a little weird, but that different strokes for different folks, and that's okay. And then again, the biggest thing I would say is not being prepared. So will some institutions have in-person interviews? Will we have in-person interviews? We are hoping to, and just so you know, from a logistics standpoint, we are planning on sticking with the Association of Program Directors in Surgery has recommended that all interviews be sent out essentially around Halloween, that first week in November, all the first wave of invitations. And so we are planning on fitting with that. Once the applications are released, the end of September, we'll review them through October and release the first interview invitations out at the time that's been recommended by the APDS. Once that is done and the invitations have been sent out and we've had our interview sessions set up, we are hoping to complete all of our interviews by mid-January. And then we are hoping to have our rank list set by the end of January. And then we're hoping to allow people to come and meet with us in person, so that it'll hopefully take away the stress or pressure of you all feeling like if you don't want to come in person, that you have to. And so the hope is that'll allow us, we'll set up some sessions for the residents, probably some night out kind of stuff. And this is obviously assuming COVID is safe and the circumstances are safe, but assuming it is, we will then have some in-person sessions so you can come here and meet us and see the institution and see the city and see what you think, so that you can then hopefully finalize your rank list without feeling the pressure of necessarily having to come here in person. So we are hoping to do that. But I have found, and our surveys have shown it year after year, that once people have a chance to come here and see the place and see the city, that they're usually hooked, and we go up in their rank list significantly. So that's kind of our plans. I think I've seen a couple. I love that some people did wear shorts at their interviews, but and then so I do hope that the preference signaling will help with some of the hoarding. We'll see. It's the first time that we're doing it in general surgery, and so I'm very excited about it. I'm rather than trying to limit kind of the free trade aspect of it and limit the number of interviews that you all can do and limit the number of interviews we can offer. My hope is that preference signaling will help with that. And so how will we approach the signals? I think it's just going to help. To me, we get 1,400 applications for our 8, now 9 slots. To me, when you got 1,400 people in a room, it's hard to notice everybody. We do have a holistic approach to reviewing the applications. And so we try to review essentially all of them if we can. Now, you can imagine the logistics of that and how hard it is. But to me, the preference signal is, if somebody's in the back of the room, they're raising their hand saying, look at me. So I do think it will make sure that we do pay attention to those applications a little bit more. It won't guarantee an interview, but it'll make sure that we recognize that there are particular people out there, for reasons that may not be clear upon the initial holistic review, are earnestly interested in WashU. And we do find that people will put messages in their personal statements or other things. We try to catch all of those. And obviously we notice that if people are from here and things like that, but I think it's a great system to at least get people who are earnestly interested to let us know that they are. But we'll see. We're going to try it out for the first time this year, just as you all are. So with that, I was going to kind of introduce folks by how I see them. It's in no particular order. And I'm going to introduce the faculty. Well, actually, everybody's spread out, so I'll just go in order. But Dr. Reed, I've got you on first. Dr. Reed's one of our vascular surgeons and associate program directors. Dr. Reed, please introduce yourself and give your thoughts about kind of what your one recommendation you have about virtual interviewing, and perhaps one surprise you had from your experience last year.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Nanette Reed. I'm one of the vascular surgeons here and one of the associate general surgery program directors. I'm super excited to see you all, and hopefully we'll be talking to many of you as we move through the interview season. I was pessimistic last year, as I know many of my colleagues were as well. And my big surprise was that I thought that it went a lot better than I anticipated that it would. And I think that speaks to how prepared our applicants were. Krista, who is our she's sitting to my left on my side of the screen, who does a fantastic job pushing us in and out of Zoom rooms and making it seem very seamless. Although I know she's working hard on her end, she makes it look easy, and we sure appreciate that. I think the thing, my big pointer, I would echo what Paul said. I think some of the challenging interviews I had were really more technical in the sense that we had some audio losses and things. So I would say definitely practice with your system. If you need to get headphones or a microphone, I would do that. Just make sure we can hear you well, and that we don't lose you, because I definitely had some people that, we have a good conversation and then I lost them. And I don't quite know what happened with that, but we got it back through, and I think it all worked out for the best. But we don't want that to happen to you. Otherwise, I would say that, St. Louis is a wonderful gem of a city, and I think our program is absolutely first rate. And I think that I would continue to look at what we have to offer. And even if you can't be here in person, we'll try to bring you here as close to in person as we possibly can to give you a feel of the place.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. I see Catherine Zivanov with her mask on in the ICU, and she and I were just hanging out in the sim lab a little while ago, and I know she's on call tonight in the SICU. So I want to take advantage of you, Catherine, while you're here. She's one of our interns, came from Vanderbilt. Do you mind introducing yourself and then just maybe saying one thing, one surprise you had, and one piece of advice, and then hopefully you can hang on for the later part of the session too, if anyone has questions.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Wise. I think one of the biggest surprises for me with virtual interviewing was how well it was actually able to discern how well residents got along. I didn't think I would see that. And you kind of start to notice when you go to session after session, the ones where you just stay in these large group formats and people are kind of awkwardly talking over one another and the messaging is maybe inconsistent, versus the ones where I would urge everybody to reach out to anyone who says anything that you're remotely interested in, and then talk with them after these sessions. Because I think doing that is when you really start to see where people's interests lie, and then how close the residents are with one another. So I think it's definitely possible. And I've been just very pleasantly surprised, particularly at WashU, with how supportive everyone is. You can see it in the way that they run these sessions and the way that they run the interviews, and that rings true. As an intern, I'm here on SICU nights, but yet they're letting me join this session. And I see several of my co-interns also on this call. So definitely just get to know all the people, reach out to any of us if you hear us say anything that you happen to be interested in. And I hope I can stay on after we finish sign out and help answer some questions a bit later.
Thanks, Catherine. I think that's a great piece of advice, is that I think most institutions have really opened themselves up, will provide phone numbers, emails, other contacts. And I think the comment that she made there about if you feel like you make a connection with somebody, take advantage of that. If there's a program that you're really interested in, maybe choosing your top 5 or 10 programs or so, and really reach out to people to see if the vibe that you got from the interview session on the virtual format really meets with what the actuality is. And that may have been positive or negative, but you want to confirm that before you either throw the program out or put it up at number 1 for you. So Lade, I saw it looks like you're also in the hospital. Do you mind saying a few things? Lade was a WashU student and is here with us as an intern. Do you mind mentioning maybe one surprise you had and one piece of advice?
Yes. Wait, can I speak from you? I'll speak from Catherine's computer.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know you two were there together. Okay. That's perfect. See, here are the technical issues you can encounter.
Hi, I'm Lade. I went to WashU for med school, and Catherine and I are signing out right now, so there's some background noise. But
you're going to have to talk into her earphones there, her earbuds.
This is teamwork at its finest right here. Yeah, I went to WashU for med school here as an intern. One surprise, I think, like Catherine said, just the approachability of different people in different programs to talk with you outside of the formal virtual interviews. I think that's something that everyone should really take advantage of. I noticed last year, like, it was very easy to get in touch with faculty and residents at different programs. and people are really willing to share their experiences, especially since last year we couldn't interview in person. So that would be one thing that surprised me. And also my piece of advice along with that is just to really lean into that and take advantage of that willingness and approachability of people in different places to talk with you.
Thank you all both very much. I appreciate it, especially in the midst of sign out. So, Dr. Brian Myers, one of our thoracic surgeons. Brian, do you mind saying a few things?
Sure. Yeah, hi, welcome everybody. I've actually been here for 25 years. I did 2 years of training here for thoracic surgery, and I stayed on the faculty in 1998 and have been a happy member of the faculty ever since then, and taking part in general surgery evaluation process, the internship evaluation process, and meeting all the medical students has been a great part of that 23 years on the faculty. We take great pride in being part of the innovative aspect of the training program here, in that we have a 4-3 program for training folks to be cardiac or thoracic surgeons, and we work closely with general surgery program directors and associate program directors to try to work together to nurture those people's interests. With regard to last year and the virtual thing, my big surprise was how well it worked. I mean, I must say that although I'm a huge fan of meeting everybody in person, this really, the pros and the cons almost neutralized each other, and the accessibility and the way that I think the applicants are at more ease because they're in their own environment. I think that probably was very good. And then negatives, I think, is just there are a lot of kind of offhand conversations. I was a regular attendee of the Friday night get-togethers where you just kind of bump into people, or somebody will draw 2 people together and say, "Oh, I was just talking to this person, and you need to talk to them." You know, those kind of serendipitous things don't happen as easily, but they still can happen. They still can happen. One tip I would give you: so you have somebody close to you whose opinion you trust. You know, look at your kind of projected little, two-dimensional depiction of yourself and get some feedback. And like, for instance, on the screen that I'm looking at, Fauzi Ferris, you're like the prototypical. You got a simple blurred background. The colors are rich. You're in great focus. And Paul Wise and myself, we got this weird background, and I try to fill in the light, so I got a little grow light here to try to look better, but it doesn't work that well. So you have somebody that you trust and whose opinion you value give you a little feedback before you get in the interview season, so everything looks good. Because if your picture's blurry, then some fraction of the people are going to think you're blurry, and it's probably not true. But you only have one chance to make a really good first impression. And Fauzi, you're nailing it. You're doing a great job. So.
Dr. Myers, thank you. And I've taken your advice, and I now have blurred out my background because I want you to think well of me.
All right, I'm gonna do my own background switch too while I listen to the rest here.
I do have a Millennium Falcon background, but it apparently, when I changed my computers, it disappeared. So I'll stick with the blur. So, and Dr. Sachs, I saw you. I think hopefully you're still on. Oh, there you are. I see you. Okay. Dr. Bethany Sachs, one of our associate program directors, minimally invasive surgeon. Dr. Sachs.
Welcome, everybody. I'm also the surgery clerkship director, so I do recognize some faces of visiting sub-Is and some of our current students. So while Dr. Wise was talking, I kept thinking of things I was going to add, and then he would say them. So I don't have much to add in terms of advice. I will reiterate what everybody's saying, which is that I didn't expect it to go as well as it did. And again, kudos to Krista and Haley for managing everything so well. I'm in the backseat of my car, which is why I have a virtual background that keeps going in and out, because I'm picking up my daughter from field hockey practice. But I will say that, yes, paying attention to those things and the lighting and everything else, just, as everyone said. One other thing, I think over Zoom, silences can get more awkward than if they were, like normal interview in person. So, if they say, do you have any questions? Have a question, just think of something. It's okay to ask the same question to multiple people unless it's really weird. No one's going to compare notes and be like, I can't believe what this student asked me. And they asked me the same thing. And it's okay to ask multiple people the same thing because you're looking for different opinions and, getting different points of view. So just be prepared. As Dr. Wise mentioned, have questions, look at the website, look at what the residents do and think about things, ask your peers, ask surgery residents things that might be useful to know. What you're trying to get out of the interview is do you want to be part of this program, and just as much as we want to see if you're part of our program. So anyway, welcome everybody, and I don't want to talk too much. I know there's a lot of people here, so I'm eager to hear what our interns say more, because certainly they went through this, and I will also reiterate how amazing they are.
Thank you, Dr. Sachs. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think when I would say, like, if you want to ask that standard questions, or do you foresee any changes in the next few years? Well, who foresaw COVID and all the stuff that was going to happen? I mean, there's so many there's always changes happening. So, but if you're going to ask those kind of questions, maybe have a more pointed question like, I hear about this is going to be happening. Do you mind telling me about that? To again, kind of underscore the fact that you've done your research and things about the program. Jorge Zarate is one of our lab residents. Now, he didn't have virtual interviews last year, but he's actually done some really cool kind of surgical education related research related to this. And so I asked him to come on to kind of give his 2 cents about what he has learned about the impact of virtual interviews and kind of folks' thoughts on a bigger scale, not just with surgery, but with other subspecialties, and maybe from that, his thoughts and advice about virtual interviews. So Jorge, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm sort of eavesdropping a little bit because I don't really have, any practical advice because I didn't have this experience, but I have been reading a lot about this topic for the last year, and I did do a big survey for all the people that interviewed on WashU for a variety of different specialties, not just general surgery. And, kind of very not surprisingly, and probably kind of similar to the experience, I think the interns will be able to vouch for this. The things that are the hardest to assess are exactly those kind of intangibles, like what are people like when they're, at this program? Do they get along? Are residents happy? All the things that are subjective and maybe difficult to glean from, a website or a video are exactly what people are struggling with in terms of really kind of discerning what the, vibes are like at a certain program and how that compares to other programs. So based on the data that I kind of studied and what I've been reading, I kind of would echo what a lot of people have already said, that I think that you need to be doing sort of extra work outside of that interview setting to be able to really tease apart what a program's culture is like. So I would encourage you to really reach out to current residents through social media, which I personally think is a greatly underutilized tool to kind of get a sense of what people really have to say when they're not sort of doing the whole pony show, like to borrow Dr. Weiss's expression, just kind of try to understand what the day-to-day life is like. Do people hang out outside of work? That kind of thing you might not be able to get from your interview day. So I'd encourage you to get in people's DMs, tweet at them or Instagram them or whatever. Lots of people share their emails quite broadly as well. I'll be more than happy to be a resource for anybody here. My Twitter handle's on my bio and I'm pretty active on there. So if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to, talk about that.
I also put it in the chat there if you want to copy it. I will say Jorge's been incredibly thoughtful and willing to talk to anybody. So he is definitely a great DM source of information. So, and I see a few other people putting in their handles as well. All right, let's see. I want Starry. I think we have to go to Starry. All right, so Dr. Tomasi and Dr. Nase are two of our interns. As you may be shocked to see, since they're hanging out together, they couples matched with us, both doing general surgery. We have a hard time drawing California folks here, but we suckered them in, people. We were really excited and they've been spectacular. So Starry, take it away.
Wow, I love that. We just told Dr. Wise that that was our celebrity nickname like 10 minutes ago, and we're already getting street cred with it. So, hi, I'm Ariana, one of the interns, and I think biggest surprise for me, kind of Dr. Wise already alluded to it, was just how willing I think we were to go outside of our comfort zone in an entirely virtual interview cycle. I almost think that actually because it was virtual, it made us more willing to accept interviews in places that I'm not really sure that we would have necessarily flown to, or even like had the capacity to explore, just with like, you know, like flights from California to the East Coast, California to Midwest and the South and all that. So it really made so many programs accessible to us. Yes, we had to wake up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. for some interviews, but it was so comfortable, I think, to be able to do that kind of thing, like at our house, then go get breakfast on breaks downstairs, like with our parents in the kitchen. And it was a really, I think, wonderful experience and pushed us out of our comfort zones more than we thought. And now we're somewhere that we absolutely did not see ourselves being a year ago. But this is kind of deja vu, because this like exact interview session a year ago was when we first like truly started to fall in love with WashU as a program. So it's super fun to be here and kind of talk to you all. I think for advice, I would say a big thing, I mean, especially couples match, it was really important for us to assess our priorities and what we wanted in a program together. But I think also as an individual, just think about what is it that you want. It's really easy to get suckered in, I think, into like, what should I be to make X program like me? Or what does this program want to see in me? But at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to residency, you're the one that's going to be happy, and you're the one that's going to be there for 5 to 7 years and ultimately making your career out of this like really life-changing experience. So make it something that you actually want to be a part of and are not just molding yourself into because you feel like it's what you should do or what's right. I also will say on Dr. Sachs's thing about having questions, I actually had like flashcards, you know, like little stickies on your phone or on your desktop, like in the back with a bunch of questions for faculty and for residents that I just had pre-prepared, because I knew that sometimes I would just like, you know, totally blank when they say, do you have any questions? You know, you have 25 questions that you want to ask them, but you forget in the moment. And I think that's like a one fun little cheat that you can do for virtual interviews, is just like have it in the back of your Zoom screen. And, you know, as long as you're really creative about not like losing eye contact with your interviewer, I think you can utilize some of those things in order to, you know, just make yourself look awesome. Like use the virtual interviewing to your advantage.
Yeah. And I'm Steven. One surprise for me was just, you know, how less stressful the interview process was with everything being virtual. Being a 4th year medical student is like one of the greatest times of your life. You don't really have that much responsibility. After you do your sub-Is, your schedule is oftentimes lighter. But then again, you are applying a residency during that time. You find that during virtual interviews, a lot of your time is not spent on an airplane. Instead, you're kind of just a small box on someone's screen on Zoom. But with that comes a lot of free time. And I encourage everyone to find activities that help you stay sane during this incredibly stressful time. For us, it was like, you know, just hanging out with friends in med school, going to the beach, things that just made us like, you know, kind of forget that we were making this really big decision, but also gave us time to kind of just like, you know, take time and think and reflect on the decisions we were making. One piece of advice I have for you all is to basically write down as much as you can. Everyone says the key to being a great intern is having a good pen. I think it's the exact same thing for being a good residency applicant as well. Even if it's just simple things, if you're attending a Zoom info session and writing down, after this session, WashU was great. I remember when we attended this last year,
so funny.
Yeah, we just would literally have a list of programs and we'd write, okay, session on 8/24. Awesome, love the residents. And stuff as simple as that, you'll find will really help you down the road when you're trying to make your rank list and you have, you know, learned about like 30 or so programs and they all started to kind of mesh together. Going back to those notes and having something where you can refresh your brain and be like, oh yeah, WashU, I love that program. Or any program that you end up falling in love with is great, but just try to keep some sort of notes that'll help you make that decision down the road.
I had one question for you all, especially since you hadn't been to St. Louis before. So in a situation where you look at a program, you have a great virtual experience with that program, and recognizing that this St. Louis may not have been the only city you visited for the first time during recruitment, how did you decide which cities you were going to go to in person? How did you kind of decide how you're going to make that commitment? How did that work for you all?
Yeah, I think we made a preliminary rank list, and we got really serious about where we were actually interested in looking. And I think the couple of places that we did visit were places we had never been before. And then there were some programs in places that we had been before, maybe necessarily hadn't seen the exact campus, but we felt comfortable like thinking, okay, we could picture ourselves living in X apartment. But it was really places that we were entirely unfamiliar with. And for especially surgery residency, it's a pretty big commitment to move somewhere after never having seen the program or even like the entire place. So I think that's kind of what we did is we made a rank list, and then, we strengthened our rank list through our trip, and we actually submitted our rank list here in St. Louis.
Yeah. And again, you guys are making a very big decision on where to spend this next chapter of your life. And as we mentioned before, you will find yourself with a lot of free time, especially once like January hits and interviews kind of slow down. And you do have a couple months before you submit and finalize your rank list. I encourage all of you to take advantage of that time and, of course, be as safe as you can. But if there is a city that you're interested in and you've never been before, it would be a great opportunity to kind of explore that before making that final decision.
Thank you very much. Dr. John Kirby is one of our ACCS faculty. John, you want to say a few words?
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I think the virtual interviewing, all of this allows all of us to really enjoy focus on things that are important to us. And I would encourage you as you move through virtual interviews to take advantage of that focus. Because I think there are a lot of tells. I'll point out that you've seen people today broadcasting from their office, from their home, the back seat of their car. I think we're conveying, or we're trying to convey, that this is part of the fabric of our lives. And we think that focusing on the whole interviewing process is really key. This is how we build our next generation of trainees. And I've really enjoyed the idea that all of this virtuality has allowed us to really be more specific in our focus and create more opportunities like that. So welcome.
Thanks, John. Jeff Platnick's one of our MIS surgeons and also an associate program director. Jeff, do you mind mentioning kind of one surprise from the virtual interview experience that you had this past year, and one piece of advice or recommendation?
Hi, everybody. We're glad you're here. As Dr. Wise mentioned, my name is Jeff Platnick. I'm a minimally invasive surgeon, but as most people know, I do maximally invasive surgery. So the M stands for both things, and that I do complex hernia repair. I joined the faculty here in 2015, so we just finished 6 years, and I did all my training in Cleveland, Ohio. And we really love St. Louis. It's been a great match for us and our family. We had 3 kids. We had our third right when we arrived. Surprisingly, we haven't seen any of them circle through yet, but I'm sure there's a 5-year-old waiting to get onto Zoom. I don't want to sound like a broken record, so I'll say I hated Zooms. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, it worked really well. I was pretty surprised. I may have had a decubitus ulcer on my backside after several days of sitting in my chair. So if anything, it made me invest in a good desk chair so I could be comfortable, but it works really good. I think you heard a lot of the advice from people as far as the specifics of Zoom. I do agree. I think the one thing that you really miss out on is the interaction of people, because I think that means a lot. Like these colleagues, whether it's your co-interns or your future senior residents, will be your family in one form or another for 5 or 7 years. And so it's really important to see how people interact and how the residents get along together. And even despite us being on Zoom, I think our team has shown like this is really what this place is about. It's really meant to be a family, and that kind of comes from the top down, from the chairman being supportive of the faculty being here for the residents, and everything in between. And so hopefully that will get spread across in the evening tonight. So that'd be my advice for you. Take advantage of kind of learning as much as you can about the residents and how they get along and how they interact with everybody. As everybody has mentioned, you are free to reach out to us at any time. If I'm not at soccer or hockey or something like that, I'm certainly happy to pick up the phone and chat online, email, text, whatever is needed. So we're happy to have you here. Hopefully you can join some of the other sessions and get a lot out of it.
Thank you, Dr. Blatnick. Shailene, you put a couple texts in there. Shailene Sachs, one of our interns, and mentioned that she couples matched with her couple in orthopedics. And there she is. Shailene, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that everyone's already given a lot of great advice. I guess the one thing that surprised me, kind of the same thing as everyone else has said, I think that you are really able to suss out the interactions of residents and the culture of a program more than I expected to. And I think that everyone was very genuine and kind, and pretty much the same as I kind of perceived them to be virtually, that they were in person, at least here at WashU. And the other piece of advice I have is kind of what Ari was saying about taking advantage of interviews being virtual. I actually had documents up on my screen with like little summaries of my research or different projects that I had, so I could refresh my memory between interviews. I try not to read off of it because I feel like that would be pretty obvious that you're reading off of a document. But I would also have little blurbs about who I was interviewing with, so I could kind of refresh my memory on that and any specific questions I had. And I would actually minimize my Zoom screen to be right under my webcam, so it looked like I wouldn't ever be tempted to look at myself, and I would still see my interviewer, but I wouldn't see myself. So then I would just kind of see the documents with the cheat sheets I had. So I thought that worked out pretty well.
That's brilliant. I love that because I'm the same way. I have that great tendency. I mean, when you're this good looking, it's hard not to look at yourself. And so I find myself doing that all the time. I kind of blind myself with the sheen off the bald head, but whatever, it's the way it is. But yes, so I do the same thing as try to put my face underneath the screen so much, or the camera, so much more likely to look at that. Shailene, that's great. And I love the cheat sheets idea. I think that's brilliant. I mean, there's, just as Ariana mentioned, a lot of times you're in the midst of something and you just go blank, and the chance to be able to have that available to you and take advantage of this format is a great idea. I love it. I think it's great. I want
to say one quick thing.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That this is actually very important. So Starry just made a comment about how interviews ask about your hobbies. We always do. So I had one person put houseplants as a hobby, which is fine. And so I asked them about their houseplants, and they couldn't talk about it. Like, they just had nothing to talk about. So if you're going to put something as a hobby or an activity of something you did, make sure you can talk about it. So we all know that's fake, Dr. Wise. It's okay.
No, real.
But I think that's a really good point, because don't put anything on your application that you're not willing or have the background to talk about. And as promised, there's a little one. There's my mini me.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And if you have no houseplants in your background or have no access to a houseplant, that might stand out. So sorry, Iwana.
Hi, I'm Awana. I was actually a medical student here at WashU, and I'm one of the interns. I want to second what people said about doing your best to get a feel of the resident relationship throughout your interviews. And I want to put in a plug for WashU and the strength of its sort of collegiality and community. I think you will hear a lot of people say that this institution, hear a lot of people say that their institutions are excellent in every single subspecialty. And I think that's true. This is very true here. And you'll hear them say that they have excellent paraprofessional and research opportunities. And this is very true here and is very true elsewhere. But I think something that makes this place especially unique is that in addition to having all those things, there's a fantastic and extremely supportive and extremely open community. And to have all those three things in a top tier surgical program is very rare. So I feel like there are no residents, senior residents, mid-level residents, lab residents that I don't feel like I can't approach with questions. And I'm going to pick on Jorge here because I can't even remember when I met Jorge the first time. I feel like he's always just been there and I've always known him. But he has listened to a lot of my silly questions about just interning, or on my first call night, I ended up texting one of the residents who was actually, she's a lab resident who was moonlighting as the on-call person overnight on another side of campus, to ask her the silliest question, like, how do I order blood? Like, I have never physically put in this order, and I do not know how to do it. I do not know how to do it safely. And she walked me through it. And it was a totally open and super friendly and kind of amusing conversation to have at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so that's really how I feel about everyone here. And then in general, interview advice, a piece of advice I'll give generally as I think an intern is to figure out a systematic and effective way for you to do something and then do it every single time. And I share that advice for all sorts of activities, like pre-rounding or rounding or talking to patients, but that goes the same for interviewing. So in terms of your physical interview setup, where your laptop is positioned, and if you have to put it on books, or what your lighting is like and what your background looks like, and just practice it a couple of times until you find, or where your internet connection is like, just practice it a couple of times, either with just Zooming with a friend or Zooming with someone at your school who does practice sessions, and then do it the same way every time for every single interview. There are too many weird technological variables and too many weird lighting variables to risk messing them up. So just find something that works for you and just be consistent about it. And I think that's pretty effective.
Thank you. I was going to ask Helen to say a few words, but she's driving and I'm worried that she'll have an accident and I'll be blamed. And so Helen, we'll get you later. Forrest Williams, one of our prelim interns who's actually doing radiology, but I thought it'd be great to get his input about his experience in virtual interviews. So Forrest.
Sure, absolutely. Like Dr. Wise said, I'm actually going to the IR track, but I elected to do a prelim year here at WashU. I did my undergrad or medical school at University of Tennessee down in Memphis. As far as something that kind of surprised me about the interview season, I think everybody's kind of mentioned this before, but my main concern going in was really being able to get a feel for how well I would fit in with the program. And honestly, being able to interview with people and actually just sit down and have conversations. I was really surprised how well I was able to kind of ascertain whether or not I'd be able to get along with individuals within a program. As far as advice, I think Stephen kind of mentioned it earlier, but every time or whenever you have an interview, have a list of criteria or a systematic way to review programs based on things that are important to you. And then as soon as you're done with the interview, sit down and write down all of your thoughts. Spend 20, 30 minutes writing down absolutely everything you can about the program, how well you got along with the residents, how well you got along with the faculty, things you liked about the program. That way, whenever you go back to look at everything in 2 or 3 months, you're able to kind of distinguish between programs that way. I found that to be really helpful.
Great. Thank you, Forrest. Appreciate it. I saw Ife Ogarige, one of our interns as well from Howard. Ife, you mind saying any surprise you had with virtual interviews and any piece of advice about virtual interviews?
Hi, guys. Definitely I would say that a surprise that came to me was, I think as you go along in the interview process, you'll find that things become somewhat repetitive a little bit. But WashU was actually my last interview of the interview season. And I was just so surprised at how unique WashU was and how much it stood out to me. In spite of me having gone through all those interviews. I will say that I agree with everybody in terms of, writing down notes, after your interview. It's really helpful for a rank list process. It's very helpful for me. And also just kind of trusting your gut. Whatever was the impression that you got from that place, write it down. And also think about the type of people that train there, the type of people that you interacted with, because the people that you're around the most are the people that you'll become the most like. You have to ask yourself, do you really want to become this type of surgeon? Is this the type of surgeon that you want to become? And I found that, from the people who I interacted with during my interview day at WashU, that most strongly reflected my interest, and not just on a professional and academic level, but also on a personal development level as well. So yeah, I would say that, yeah, definitely write down, take notes, make an effort to try to interact with some of the residents and faculty, maybe outside of your interview, and see how that goes. And then also, yeah, just don't be afraid to reach out. You can feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm gonna make sure to drop my contact info here. But yeah, I definitely think that it's also important just, to kind of go with your gut.
Great, Tife, thank you so much. And Daniel Colchado is one of our interns from Baylor. And Daniel, I saw you kind of, oh, maybe you popped up to the top now.
I'm here now.
Oh, there you are. Great. Hey, thanks for being here.
Yeah, so my piece of advice would be to, I feel like a lot of it has been said, but one of the things that I found very important is to just be true to yourself. That there's a lot of programs that will, want someone like you in their program, in their new cohort. But ultimately, it is your decision. It is your rank list, and you have to really think about your priorities. There's a lot of there are many variables to account for, but I think if you from the very get-go think about what are the things that you value before you start interviewing, say whether that is how you see residents interacting with each other, or location, or being in a place that supports family, which I think WashU has been amazing about. I think having those priorities established before you jump into the interview season was very, very helpful. I think coming in with already an idea of what I wanted to see and what I didn't want to see helped me not just make the decision, but also kind of come up with questions to ask in their interview process. And I was surprised by how once that was in place, how much less stressful, just like Stephen said, how less stressful it was. And it also, I think, just puts you in a better mood as an interviewer, knowing that you're being genuine to yourself, and that the things you talk about are things you want to talk about. So yeah, I think one thing I found very helpful, just like Eva said, reach out to residents, you can reach out to me. I've already had several students who have messaged, and I think one of the strengths of this program is, just like everyone has said, how approachable everybody is, and we really stand by that. So, and we're amongst our class, we're all friends, so we're true to that.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Nikki Rossetti came to us from CASE.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I agree with what everyone else has said. I don't need to say it again, but I have two main pieces of advice. One is hyper practical, and I don't know if this will still be relevant within the age of like signaling this new thing that we didn't have, and the more coordinated interview release dates, but you will find that a lot of programs have interviews on the same day, and I don't advise attending 2 interviews on the same day, although I think people have done it. I personally did not. I think it would get confusing and exhausting, but you may have 2 programs that you're extremely interested in that each only have a couple of interview days, and all of them are shared. So at the beginning of my interview season, this might have been kind of neurotic, but I went through and created my own Google Calendar of the interview dates that had been published online for all the programs that I interviewed at and was hoping to get interviews for. And then when I was lucky enough to get interview invitations from those programs, I could immediately pull up my Google Calendar and see like what the conflicts were with other programs. And if I was still waiting to hear from a program that conflicted, I wouldn't book something on that same day because I wanted to leave it open. So I was really strategic about my scheduling, and ultimately I never had to cancel or decline an interview because I wasn't available. So that I highly recommend. And then as it pertains to WashU, one of the things I was already very excited about the program, but then I was very impressed with how accessible they made the program outside of the interview day. I think every program puts on a pretty good show on interview day. They're representing the best version of themselves. But only some programs will invite you to be kind of part of their everyday resident education or M&M conferences or Super Bowl Sunday evening hangout with Dr. Eberlein, the chair of surgery. These were all things that I did and gave me like a window into the program outside of the perfectly orchestrated interview day. So I would recommend taking advantage of those opportunities here at WashU, but also at other programs, because it gives you sort of an idea of whether the interview day is consistent with like the real everyday nature of the program. So I think those are kind of the two things I have to add beyond what everybody else has already mentioned.
Thanks, Becky. Appreciate it. All right, I'm a little nervous about asking Helen, but.
I'm pulling into my parking lot. So.
All right, good. My timing is good.
I think my biggest thing is just make sure you all take care of yourselves too. It can be, I don't know if someone has said this already, but interviewing is pretty exhausting, and being on a virtual interview means sometimes you'll hear some people doing like 30 interviews or whatever, and you're like, oh man, I only have like 5 right now. But like the whole process is so variable, so don't get too down on yourself if it's not going the way you want it to. If you like stuttered during one of your answers, like don't freak out. And then, you know, being on Zoom like 24/7, constantly having to like smile and whatever is also really exhausting. So like just give yourself time to step away from the computer and have time to rest and, you know, talk about other stuff besides interviews. I did the whole like I went beyond notes. I actually had like a recording of myself after every interview, so you could see like, oh, you know, facial expressions and like when you look back. And also I didn't want to read any of my notes. But when it came to making the rank list, like I didn't actually even go back to my notes. Like I just had a gut feeling, like Ife was saying about like, you know, this just feels like home, and I think it just works out at the end. So just trust in the process. I think the match crazily works somehow, but make sure that you're taking care of yourself too during this whole season. It's a long season, so be ready.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's notable to me is that as Helen mentions, that this has allowed what used to be a relatively compressed time, especially a lot of programs would try to have their interviews during times when travel wasn't bad, because we know as you get into January and February, lots of flights get canceled and it becomes problematic. So most of us would try to push it in, but because of virtual interviews, we can interview later in the season. I noted a lot of programs did that. And so more programs would push into February and later. And so it's actually expanded the interview season rather than contracted it. So it can make it so that it feels like it's a little bit more interminable. We wouldn't normally be having these kind of get-togethers in August, that's for sure. I've noticed that a number of residents have joined. Will Chapman is on, one of our administrative chief residents, and he's been on. Kristen Seiler is also one of our administrative chief residents. Julie Clanahan's one of our new lab residents. And I want to give you all an opportunity, because it's already after 7 and we want to not keep things too long. I think we got, and I also see Dr. Liu, one of our interns, is also on. And so what I think probably be best for you all, just so you have a chance to be able to ask the questions you want to ask. And I know we didn't get to all the questions that were on the that were sent out. If I didn't get to your particular question and you really earnestly want to hear from me about my thoughts about your query, by all means, I put my email address in the chat a little while ago. Feel free to reach out to me directly. And we will be having more sessions, so you can come back to those as well. If if you've got the WashU bug now, we'd be happy to have you come back for any of the other virtual sessions. So by all means, come back. What we're going to do is we're going to stop the recording. The faculty who are here, we're going to head out and we're going to let you all talk with the interns, administrative chiefs, some of the lab residents who are here, other folks who are here. And then we'll look forward to hearing more from you all during the interview season. Best of luck to everybody. Take care of yourselves. Please be safe. Obviously, it's a crazy time out in the world with many reasons, not just COVID. So please take care of yourselves. And we're glad that you're here. And we wish you the best of luck. And we hope to see you more during the season. Krista, you can kick all the faculty off. Y'all have a great